My name is Olivia Hayes. I am 23 years old, and I will never forget my graduation day. It was supposed to be the day both sisters stepped into a new chapter of life together, but in my family, only one person was deemed worthy of celebration. My twin sister, Sophia. In the middle of cheers and camera flashes, Sophia was handed a red Tesla with a giant bow by our parents. The crowd erupted in applause as if she had just touched the American dream. And me? I was given a small box. Inside was nothing more than a cheap plastic piggy bank with a few loose coins rattling inside. They told me I was the stronger one. I didn't need anything else, as if the independence I had struggled so hard to build was just an excuse for them to abandon me. I stood there, surrounded by the noise, my heart heavy, realizing that in my family's eyes, I had never been special. If you've ever been belittled, compared, or felt like nothing more than a shadow in your own family, maybe you'll understand what that moment felt like. And what about you? Where are you listening to this story from? Share your own story in the comments so I know I'm not alone before you continue listening to mine. My childhood, from the outside, might have looked perfectly normal. A spacious house in the suburbs of Phoenix, roses blooming in the front yard, a swing on the back porch, and a living room filled with sunlight and walls covered in framed family photos. But behind those photos, life for Sophia and me was never the same, even though we were twins. From a young age, I could already feel the difference, so clear it could never be denied. Sophia was the precious gem, and I was only the shadow. I still remember our 7th birthday. Sophia received a purple bicycle with a wicker basket on the front, the tires still smelling of fresh paint. The whole neighborhood came over, friends clapped, my mother's face glowed with pride, and my father filmed the scene as if capturing pure gold. I had a gift too, a children's book, the cover worn, the pages carrying the smell of damp paper. They told me that reading makes you smart. My mom said that, but compared to Sophia's shiny new bike, my gift only made my face burn with shame, wishing I could disappear into the ground. When Sophia turned 10, she was given an American Girl doll, so luxurious it came with outfits and accessories that changed with the seasons. She would sit for hours brushing its hair, showing off the dresses to her friends. My birthday gift was a second-hand dress, still wrinkled even after my mother ironed it. I forced a smile, whispered my thanks, but inside I felt nothing but emptiness. After that, I stopped looking forward to birthdays because I already knew how it would end. Sophia would always get something special, and I would get something handed to me just so it wouldn't look like I had nothing. At 12, Sophia received her first iPhone. Back then, an iPhone was still a symbol of wealth and status. The whole school knew she had a new phone, and kids swarmed around her like she was a celebrity. I sat quietly with an old flip phone that had been passed down from some relative. When I asked my mother, "Why don't I get what Sophia does?" she answered so casually, "Because you're stronger. You need to let your sister have more." Those words carved themselves into my memory like an invisible sentence. In my mother's eyes, being stronger meant I wasn't worthy of care. There was one Christmas I'll never forget. The tree sparkled in the living room, lights twinkling, the smell of cookies and cinnamon filling the air. Sophia tore open the largest box, and inside was a brand new electric piano, glossy black, its keys glowing under the lights. My parents cheered, relatives gasped in admiration, and Sophia immediately sat down to play a few notes while the room erupted in applause. My gift was a small, light box. When I opened it, I found a paperback book with a bright red clearance sticker still stuck to the corner. For a moment, the room went quiet, until my mother quickly said, "Books will make you smarter." I smiled faintly, but inside I felt only cold. It was as if the whole room had silently reminded me that I didn't matter as much as my sister. I asked my mother many times when I was still a child who didn't understand the ways of the world. Why do I always get less? Why does Sophia always have more? And without the slightest hesitation, she would repeat the same line like a chorus. Because you're stronger, you need to give in to your sister. I naively believed it was true, that my role was to sacrifice so my sister could shine. But the older I grew, the more I realized that answer was nothing but an excuse. An excuse for their favoritism, a reason to keep painting Sophia as the precious jewel while pushing me deeper into the shadows. I learned to be silent, no longer asking questions the way I once did. But silence didn't mean acceptance. It was just the armor I wrapped myself in to hide the cracks forming inside. Every time Sophia showed off something new, I smiled, but in my heart another fracture appeared. Every time my mother praised her as exceptional, I nodded, but in my mind I could hear the whisper, "You are not enough." Those cracks slowly built into a wall, separating me from my family even when I was still young. I stopped believing in promises, stopped expecting fairness. Quietly, I told myself, one day, I will get out. But back then, I had no idea that the way out would be paved with pain and tears. I didn't know that the injustice of childhood was only the beginning of a life where I would have to fight for every step, while Sophia always walked on a red carpet rolled out before her. High school was when I began to feel the gap most clearly, not just in gifts, but in the opportunities my family created for us. On Sophia's 16th birthday, my parents threw her a huge backyard party with a 3-tier cake, a hired DJ, and the centerpiece gift that set the whole neighborhood buzzing. A brand new blue Toyota Corolla, still smelling of fresh paint, rolled out with a bright red bow on the hood. Her friends screamed in excitement, my parents beamed with pride, bragging that their daughter now had her own car to get to school and that she deserved it. And me? I got a new backpack, bought on clearance at Walmart. My father patted my shoulder and said, "You're stronger, taking the bus will teach you patience." So for 3 years of high school, I woke up early, walked to the bus stop, squeezed in with dozens of other students, enduring scorching summer afternoons and freezing winter mornings. Meanwhile, Sophia cruised in her own car, arriving at school with a designer bag our mother bought her, always on time and never worried about being late. On the days when the bus broke down, I stood for hours in the blistering sun, and when I told my family about it, my mother only shrugged. "That's your lesson, it will help you grow." When we both got accepted to the University of Colorado Boulder, the favoritism repeated itself. Sophia chose business administration. Immediately, my parents agreed to cover her full tuition, rent her an apartment near campus, and even send her monthly allowance. They said it was an investment in Sophia's bright future. I chose environmental science, dreaming of one day working on conservation projects. But when I asked about tuition, my father's voice was cold. "You're independent, FAFSA and scholarships will cover it. You should learn how to manage on your own." So I filled out FAFSA forms, signed up for student loans, and picked up part-time work in the department's lab. At night, I rushed to a cafe near campus, scrubbing dishes and wiping tables just to afford rent and food. Our college lives were like two parallel worlds. Sophia lived in a bright apartment, spending weekends at parties with friends, posting photos on Instagram with a cocktail in hand, her captions filled with flashy quotes about enjoying life. I sat in a cramped dorm room, eyes glued to my old laptop, writing reports while sipping cold coffee. Some nights I finished my dishwashing shift close to midnight, my hands wrinkled from soaking in water, the smell of grease clinging to my hair and clothes. Back in my room, I still had to study until 2 or 3 in the morning just to finish my essays on time. The comparisons grew harsher whenever relatives called. Every mention of Sophia was met with my parents proudly listing her accomplishments, her networking events, her plans to start a company after graduation. As for me, if anyone asked, they brushed it off with, "She's fine, she takes care of herself." That was all. No pride, no admiration, just a dismissive sentence. What they didn't know was how much I had to sacrifice. There were nights I typed through tears, my eyes swollen, my hands trembling from exhaustion. I once fainted in the lab after staying awake for days. I thought about giving up more than once, but then I remembered every moment I had been cast aside, every painful comparison. Those wounds became my drive, pushing me to prove that I was worthy too. Sophia, on the other hand, lived the dreamy college life. She joined a sorority, hosted parties every weekend, and sometimes called me just to show off a new dress or a short vacation funded by our parents. She often said, "You're so weird, always working. Why don't you live a little, like me?" I would just smile and stay quiet. Deep down, I knew the truth. She could live carefree because everything was handed to her. For me, if I didn't work, if I didn't push forward, I had nothing. For me, 4 years of college were 4 years of sweat, tears, and exhaustion. But I never allowed myself to fall off track. Even while working endless part-time jobs, I kept my GPA high, joined research projects, and held on tightly to my dream. Every time I watched Sophia posing with friends by the lake, I told myself, one day, my achievements will be undeniable. I didn't know when that day would come, only that I would never stop moving forward until I reached it. And then, graduation finally arrived. Deep inside, a flicker of hope still burned that after everything, my parents would finally see my effort. What I didn't expect was that on that very day, the unfairness I had lived with would be exposed in its rawest form, like a slap across everything I had endured. And it was also on that day that I decided, once and for all, that I would never let myself be buried in Sophia's shadow again. Graduation day came under the brilliant sun of late May. The sky was a flawless blue, the sound of ceremonial music echoing across the University of Colorado Boulder campus. Hundreds of students in black gowns and square caps lined up, while parents and families filled the stands, clapping and cheering as each name was called. I took a deep breath, my chest tight with a swirl of emotions, pride for surviving 4 grueling years, but also an anxious hope that today, finally, my parents would acknowledge everything I had achieved. From a distance, I spotted my family. My parents stood side by side, their faces glowing, and Sophia stood out in a pristine white dress, her hair curled to perfection, her lips painted a vibrant red. In their hands were 2 gifts, one large box and one small. My heart quickened, a faint spark of hope flickering inside me that maybe, just this once, I would be treated fairly. Sophia's name was called first. She walked up to the stage and the crowd erupted. My father stepped forward, holding a shiny key tied with a red bow. Out in the parking lot, a blazing red Tesla Model Y slowly rolled forward, a massive bow fixed on the hood, catching the sunlight. The audience roared with cheers, cameras and phones flashing in every direction. Sophia screamed with joy, throwing her arms around my parents, her smile radiant like a movie star on the red carpet. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. My father clapped her shoulder with pride. Every gaze in the arena was fixed on my sister, as if this day belonged only to her, not to both of us. I stood frozen, forcing myself to swallow the familiar feeling. The feeling of being pushed aside in a moment that was supposed to belong to both of us. While Sophia posed for photos beside her Tesla, my mother turned to me and handed me the small box that was left. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a cheap pink plastic piggy bank, a few loose coins rattling around inside. My body stiffened, as if paralyzed. "That's it?" I blurted out, my voice hoarse. My mother gave a faint smile, her tone laced with awkwardness yet still calm. "Just a little joke. You don't really need anything else. You're independent, remember? This is just a keepsake." I looked at my father, waiting for some kind of explanation. He stayed silent, his eyes avoiding mine. Sophia glanced at me and smirked. "It suits you. Save up those coins. Maybe you'll have enough for a bus ticket." Laughter erupted from her group of friends, each sound cutting into me like salt on an open wound. I stood still. I didn't cry. My tears had long since dried after years of comparisons and abandonment. Instead, a chill ran down my spine. In that moment, I understood. To my parents, all my effort over the last 4 years would never be enough. A $1 plastic piggy bank was their reward for my persistence, for the nights I worked myself to exhaustion, for the mornings I dragged myself to class with swollen eyes from lack of sleep. The crowd was still buzzing, Sophia still striking poses beside the gleaming red Tesla, sunlight bouncing off its polished surface and making the whole scene glow. I stood there with the cheap plastic piggy bank clutched in my hand, my chest heavy as stone. I closed the box without another word. I slipped through clusters of classmates, snapping photos, still gripping that small box with the pink piggy bank inside. In my pocket was the key to my old Honda Civic, the car I had bought with every penny scraped together from dishwashing shifts and hours in the lab. I opened the door and sank into the driver's seat. The engine coughed to life, rattling and rough, but to me it was the sound of truth. "This is yours, made by your own hands." Oh! Biting my lip, I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling with both humiliation and anger. I typed a short message into the family group chat. "I am deeply disappointed in you. After today, I will not come home again. You've always told me to be independent, so I will live exactly the way you wanted." I hit send, the screen lit up and went dark again. Lifting my eyes to the rearview mirror, I saw my family still laughing, radiant beside Sophia and her brilliant red Tesla. No one even noticed I was gone. I turned the car around and merged into the stream of traffic leaving the lot. My heart was heavy, but one truth was clear. That day was not only the day I received my diploma, it was the day I realized I would never again expect fairness from them. I didn't look back, didn't wave goodbye, only drove away, leaving behind the cheers, the clicking cameras, and a family who stood there as if my absence didn't exist. In that moment, I knew deep inside that I had graduated not just from college, but from the role of being the family's shadow. My real journey was only beginning. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. My heart was still heavy, but my mind felt hollow. The early summer wind slipped through the crack of the car window, carrying the dust of the road and the faint scent of pine from the Boulder Mountains in the distance. I just kept driving, not knowing where I was headed, only knowing I couldn't go back to the place where my family was laughing, taking pictures, and celebrating Sophia as if I didn't exist. My phone buzzed in my bag, over and over. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was a few congratulatory messages from classmates. But when I finally pulled over to the side of the road to take a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and saw more than 10 missed calls, all from my dad. Before I could even inhale properly, the phone rang again. I stared at the screen, the word "Dad" glowing bright, and then let it ring out. Again and again, he called, as if something urgent had happened. I bit my lip, a wave of dread mixed with exhaustion rising in me. After everything, I couldn't bear to hear his voice in that moment. I let the phone buzz until it finally went quiet. A new notification popped up. One voicemail. "Oh." I pressed play, and my father's voice filled the car, hoarse but seething with anger. "Wherever you go, you'd better bring that car back home, or I'll call the police for theft. It belongs to the family, not to you." I sat in silence for a few seconds, then let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the car. Pulling into a small roadside lot, I opened the glove compartment. Inside, neatly clipped together in a plastic folder, were the documents I needed. I pulled them out, my eyes scanning the bold print. Registered owner, Olivia Hayes. My heart pounded, a storm of anger and pride rushing through me. I thought about every late shift scrubbing dishes in the cafe, mopping lab floors, serving demanding customers, enduring cracked hands from chemicals and soap. Every dollar I earned had piled into savings, and it was with that money that I drove this Civic home, fully mine. Yet, in my father's eyes, it was still the family's, as if nothing I owned could ever belong to me unless it was given by them. I unlocked my phone, my fingers trembling but my eyes steady. I typed out a short reply, just 4 words. It was in my name. No exclamation mark, no explanation, no defense. Just the truth. I hit send, the screen lit up, then went dark again. Leaning back in the seat, I closed my eyes and released a long breath. In that moment, a current surged through me. For the first time, I had pushed back, claimed something as mine, refusing to let them erase it. A moment later, my phone buzzed again, but I didn't bother to look. I already knew what would be waiting: scolding, threats, or even outright denial of the truth. I didn't need to hear any of it. The papers in my hand were the only voice that mattered. I slid the folder back into the glove compartment and shut it firmly. In the rearview mirror, my reflection stared back tired, but stronger than ever. I knew that from that moment on, a line had been drawn. They could go on treating Sophia as the pride and joy. Go on spinning the story that I was nothing but dependent. But I knew the truth. Everything I had was built with my own hands, and no one had the right to take that away. I started the engine and kept driving. I didn't go back to Phoenix, didn't return to the house where every childhood memory was tied to favoritism and quiet humiliation. Instead, I chose to head north, toward Seattle, chasing the environmental research projects I had always dreamed of joining. For the first time, I stepped out of my family's shadow, not asking permission, not leaving a note, simply leaving. Seattle welcomed me with its signature gray skies and the scent of rain clinging to the streets. I rented a small apartment in Capitol Hill, just big enough for a single bed, a desk, and a narrow bookshelf. It sat on the third floor, its window opening onto a damp alleyway that glowed at night with neon lights from the cafe across the street. The place was old, the paint on the walls peeling, but it was the first space I could truly call mine, where no one could walk in and deny that I existed. As soon as I settled into my new place, I started a job at an environmental research center. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay wasn't much, but I loved it. My days were spent analyzing soil and water samples, writing reports, and attending meetings with colleagues who were just as passionate about protecting nature as I was. Every time I stepped into the lab, a calmness washed over me, as if I had finally found the place where I belonged. Yet, every evening after work, I would open my phone and scroll through Facebook. There, my parents continued to post pictures of Sophia. One day, it was her standing proudly beside the gleaming red Tesla, captioned, "The pride of the Hayes family." Another day, it was a video of her at a networking event, with my mother commenting, "My daughter is truly exceptional, shining like a star." And me? I was never mentioned, as if I no longer existed in the family. The feeling was both painful and freeing. Painful, because I knew I had been erased, but freeing, because I no longer had to fight for a place in a picture they had already painted without me. Many nights, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, the sound of rain tapping softly against the window. On my desk, beside the piles of research papers, sat one thing I never put away, the pink plastic piggy bank with a few coins rattling inside. I had carried it with me from graduation day, placing it in the corner of my desk as a reminder. Every time I looked at it, my chest tightened, but it also reminded me that I could never go back to where I started. It was a scar made tangible, proof of the disregard I endured, but also the driving force pushing me forward, so that one day, when I looked back, I could smile without feeling the pain. Breaking away from my family was not easy. I had grown up believing that family was the place you could always return to, the place of protection and unconditional love. But when favoritism and neglect became the new normal, I realized staying would only bring me more pain. So even though I sometimes felt lonely, my heart was lighter. At the very least, every tear, every smile, every decision was now mine. No one else had the right to decide whether I was worthy or not. There were mornings when I watched Seattle wake up under a blanket of fog, and I told myself, I did it. I got out. That feeling wasn't exactly happiness, but it was peace, a kind of peace I had never known in my 23 years. And even though the road ahead was full of challenges, I knew that as long as I kept moving forward, I would never again have to live in Sophia's shadow or under my parents' cold gaze. I reached out and touched the pink piggy bank on my desk, the coins inside rattling with a hollow sound. It was no longer the cheap joke they handed me on graduation day. Now it was a reminder. Don't forget, Olivia. This path is yours, and only you can walk it to the end. That autumn, as Seattle sank into its endless rain, I received an email that would change the course of my career. The subject line read, "Congratulations, you have been awarded the Global Green Research Fellowship." My heart pounded as I opened it. It was a research grant from an international environmental organization, large enough to allow me to fully dedicate myself to projects on climate change and ecosystem conservation. I read every line again and again, then broke down in tears right there at my desk. After all the years of enduring, after all the times I thought I couldn't make it any further, finally a door opened before me, a door I had knocked on myself, not one laid out by someone else. The fellowship was more than money, it came with opportunity. I was invited to join a series of field projects across the United States and even abroad. The first month, I traveled to Alaska with a research team to measure glacial melt. My hands went numb inside my gloves in the bitter cold, but I felt a happiness I had never known. I could feel myself touching a global issue, contributing to something far greater than me. The next month, I flew to Costa Rica, where the dense rainforest echoed with birdsong from the canopy. I collected soil samples, analyzed biodiversity, and each evening sat with colleagues around a fire, sharing stories. For the first time, I was recognized as a real researcher, not just the second daughter who knew how to fend for herself. While I was immersed in my work, news from Phoenix still reached me now and then, usually through the whispers of a few relatives who kept in touch. My family had begun to struggle financially. My father's business was no longer thriving, partly because of poor investments and partly because of how much had been spent on Sophia. The shiny red Tesla that had once been paraded all over Facebook had now been repossessed by the finance company because the payments were never completed. The house that used to glow with lights during every holiday now sat quieter, no longer hosting lavish parties. Sophia, who had grown accustomed to luxury, was drowning in credit card debt. I heard she had maxed out her cards on endless shopping, tried to launch an online fashion store, but failed because she couldn't manage it. Instead of finding steady work, she kept waiting for our parents to bail her out. But by then, even my parents were struggling to make ends meet. The glamorous posts that once filled their social media slowly disappeared, replaced by vague statuses about hard times. I know. I didn't feel joy when I heard this, but I also no longer felt the ache I once did. What I felt was distance. My world and theirs had completely diverged. I no longer sat waiting for recognition, no longer endured cruel comparisons. I had my own career, colleagues who respected me, and a path stretching wide open ahead. As for them, they remained trapped in the same cycle of favoritism and dependency they had created for themselves. One evening in Costa Rica, as I sat on the porch of a wooden cabin writing a report, I absent-mindedly pulled the pink plastic piggy bank from my suitcase. I had carried it with me on every trip, not because it was valuable, but because it reminded me why I was here. I gave it a small shake, the coins clinking softly into the rainforest night. Once, that cheap gift had left me choking back tears. Now, it stood as proof of just how far I had come. I sipped my coffee, thinking about the past and the present. There was a time when I believed I would forever be nothing more than Sophia's shadow. But now, while I traveled across countries conducting research and contributing to the scientific community, Sophia remained stuck in her own habits of indulgence. My parents might still call her the pride of the family on social media, but reality told a different story. And I understood that some truths don't need to be forced. Time and personal choices reveal them on their own. Each morning, waking up in a new place, I reminded myself, this was never about revenge, it was about freedom. I no longer needed their recognition because I had learned to recognize myself. And with that, I finally felt at peace. Seattle remained my base, the small apartment always waiting for me after each trip. But now, it no longer felt cramped. It felt like a nest, a true home, where I could pin a world map on the wall with red dots marking every place I had been, every milestone I had carved out for myself. And on my desk, beside stacks of research papers, the pink piggy bank still sat, not a joke anymore, but a quiet reminder that sometimes, from the deepest disregard, we find the greatest drive to go the farthest. One spring afternoon in Seattle, just after returning from a long assignment in Alaska, I decided to give myself a gift. My old Honda Civic had been with me since the day I left my family, but after so many years it had grown worn, its engine sluggish, prone to breakdowns. With part of my savings from the research fellowship, I bought a new electric car. Not a flashy Tesla like the one Sophia once flaunted, but a modest silver Nissan Leaf, reliable, efficient, and environmentally friendly. It fit me, it fit my work, and most importantly, I had bought it with my own hard-earned money. I wasn't the type to show off, but during a conference on environmental research downtown, I drove the car and parked near the entrance. There, I unexpectedly ran into someone familiar, Mrs. Mitchell, our old neighbor from Phoenix. She was the same as ever, slender, sharp-eyed, and fond of gossip. When she saw me step out of the new electric car, her eyes widened. "Olivia Hayes, is that you, in Seattle? And with a new electric car, no less, how wonderful. You must be doing well." I gave a small, polite smile and replied lightly, "I'm doing fine, just working, that's all." But I knew well enough, given her quick tongue, that this news would fly back to Phoenix faster than any plane. Sure enough, a few days later, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. The screen lit up with the name, Mom. I hesitated for a moment before finally picking up. Her voice came through, sweeter and softer than I had ever heard it. "Olivia, how are you? We miss you so much. It's been such a long time since the whole family was together. We think maybe you should come visit, have dinner with us, wouldn't that be nice?" I sat in silence, her words slipping past me like wind through a crack. I hadn't forgotten the years I was cast aside, the times they only referred to me as the independent one, while every ounce of praise was showered on Sophia. And now, suddenly, they miss me so much? That same evening, before I could even decide how to respond, a text popped up from Sophia. Short, but dripping with implication. "I hear you're doing well. I'm planning to open my own boutique, just need a little startup capital. Could you help me out? After all, we're sisters, supporting each other would be so nice." I stared at the message and let out a cold laugh. Sophia had never checked in on me, never once treated me like a real sister. The last time she had texted me, it was to brag about the red Tesla on graduation day. And now, with her finances collapsing, with that same car repossessed, she turned to me for money? I sat still in my small Capitol Hill apartment, eyes fixed on the glowing screen. My fingers moved, typing out one short line, sharp as a blade. "Oh, so now I'm special, am I?" I hit send, then set the phone down on the table. Silence filled the room, broken only by the steady rhythm of Seattle rain tapping against the window. I picked up the pink piggy bank, gave it a small shake, and listened to the coins rattle inside. So it turned out that only when I smelled of money did they suddenly remember I existed. The next day, my father called. His voice was different now, no trace of the harshness from the voicemail on graduation day. Instead, it carried a strained softness, tinged with awkwardness. "Olivia, I know that maybe in the past, sometimes we weren't fair. But you're still our daughter. Family is family. How about coming to Sophia's for dinner this weekend? Let's talk things over, make peace again. What do you say?" Listening to him, the corner of my lips curled into a smile, half bitter, half mocking. Make peace? After years of abandonment, after countless times when my strength was used as an excuse for favoritism. And now, just because they heard I was driving an electric car, they suddenly remembered I was still their daughter? I didn't answer right away. But in my heart, I had already decided I would go. Not because I longed for reconciliation, but because I wanted to look them in the eye, to hear for myself what they truly wanted. I had been preparing too long to face this moment. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal. They didn't call me back out of love, but out of need. And this time, I will not stay silent. That weekend, I flew back to Phoenix for the first time in years. The city was still scorching, the sun pouring fire over the rows of red-tiled roofs. When the taxi stopped in front of Sophia's new house, I froze for a moment. The place sat in an upscale neighborhood, the lawn neatly trimmed, porch lights blazing even though dusk had barely settled. This was the place my sister now called home, and it was also the stage for the so-called reconciliation dinner my parents had so carefully arranged. The door swung open, and my mother appeared first, draped in an emerald evening dress, her face carefully painted with makeup. She gave me a perfunctory hug, the heavy perfume masking, but not erasing, the distance between us. "Olivia, it's been so long. You've lost weight," she said, her voice a blend of mild reproach and polite formality. My father stood behind her, shaking my hand stiffly, his eyes carrying that same familiar coldness, though now laced with calculation. Sophia came out last, dressed in a striking red gown, lips painted bright, looking every bit like the hostess of the evening. "So, you finally came back," she said with a smile, though her eyes flashed with mockery. Sophia's dining room was expansive, the long wooden table draped in a spotless white cloth, scented candles and roses placed in perfect arrangements. The dishes were already set: steak, salmon, salads, glasses of red wine catching the glow of the candles. I took my seat, forcing myself to stay composed. After a few shallow pleasantries, my parents asking if my work was going well, Sophia feigning interest in my research trips, the atmosphere quickly shifted. My father set his glass of wine down, his voice low but firm. "Olivia, let's not beat around the bush. Sophia is getting married, and she deserves a proper wedding. Your mother and I, well, you know business hasn't been easy lately. We think that with your stable job, you could give her a hand. Just help cover her credit card debt and part of the wedding expenses." I straightened my back and looked directly at him. Each word cut into me like a blade. After everything, all they wanted from me was money. I thought of every night spent washing dishes, every morning waking up early to work, every exhausted hour scraping by to pay my own tuition. And now, they had the audacity to ask me to clean up Sophia's mess of overspending? I set my knife and fork down, my voice sharp and cold. When I needed help, who stood by me? When I was working 3 jobs to pay for school, who lifted a finger for me? The room fell into silence. My mother's brows furrowed as she rushed to fill the void. "Olivia, don't misunderstand, we did that to teach you. You're stronger, and because of that, you have what you have today." I laughed, a sharp, joyless laugh that cut like a blade. That wasn't training, that was abandonment. You left me to struggle while pouring everything into Sophia just because she was special. Sophia tapped her wine glass, eyes blazing. "You've always been jealous of me. You have a job, you have money, and yet you're still so petty you won't even help your own family. Rich, but still selfish." I turned to her, unblinking. At least I don't live off our parents like a child who refuses to grow up. I bought every shirt, every meal, every credit toward my degree with my own hands. And you? Besides the red Tesla that the bank already repossessed, what do you have? The room fell silent. The ticking of the wall clock echoed loud and clear. My mother's mouth hung open, but no words came out, her face stiff with tension. My father gripped his glass tighter, his eyes darkening, but even he couldn't muster a rebuttal. Sophia's cheeks flushed, her lips trembled, but no answer came, only a glare filled with hatred. I looked at each of them, feeling the heavy silence settle over the table. For the first time in my life, I was no longer the one sitting quietly, swallowing everything. I was no longer the faint shadow in the glamorous family portrait they had painted. I had spoken the truth, and that truth left the entire dinner table frozen. Leaning back in my chair, I exhaled. The lavish dinner, the flickering candles, the wine swirling in crystal glasses, all of it was nothing but a thin curtain. Behind it, the raw truth stood bare. They never wanted reconciliation. They only wanted to use me. And this time, I was ready to face it. In that silence, one thing became clear. From this moment on, the ties that bound us were ready to be cut for good. After that dinner, I walked out of Sophia's house without looking back. The sound of a chair toppling, my mother's sobs, my father's furious glare, and Sophia's flushed face all faded behind the closing door. Some might have thought I was leaving in bitterness, but in truth, for the first time in my life, I felt free. I had spoken every word I needed to say. I no longer carried the weight in silence, and most importantly, I had chosen to sever the toxic cord that had bound me for so many years. The months that followed opened a brand new chapter. I continued my research, but it was no longer confined to labs or domestic projects. As my reputation grew, I was invited to join global environmental initiatives, surveying marine ecosystems in Hawaii, participating in rainforest restoration programs in South America. Each trip was another step forward, another moment of growth. I was no longer the girl pushed to the margins, but someone making tangible contributions to the world. I also began to think about giving back. On quiet nights in Seattle, when I glanced at the pink piggy bank still resting on my desk, I thought of students like myself years ago scraping by with part-time jobs to pay tuition, studying through tears and exhaustion, yet refusing to quit. So I created a small scholarship fund for environmental science students from disadvantaged backgrounds. I didn't attach my name, only left a simple note in each award email. Don't let anyone define your worth. Write your own story. Also, when I received the first thank you letter from a young woman who had been awarded the scholarship, I cried. But those tears no longer burned with bitterness, they were the tears of healing. My life became filled with new experiences. I traveled to places I had only ever seen in books, standing beneath the Eiffel Tower, listening to the wind rush across the peaks of the Alps, or sitting alone on the Oregon coast, letting the waves wash away every lingering worry. Each journey made me love myself more, love the freedom I had claimed. I gradually realized that the sweetest revenge was not proving to my family that I had succeeded, but being truly happy without needing their recognition at all. Once, on a work trip back to Phoenix, I happened to run into Sophia on the street. She was stepping out of a store, clutching designer shopping bags, but her face looked tired, her eyes clouded with worry. When she saw me, she froze. I was dressed simply jeans, a jacket, my hair tied back, but the calm in my expression made her falter. You look so different," Sophia said, her voice uncertain. I only smiled, looking straight into her eyes. "Money doesn't define me, freedom does." She went silent, her lips parting without words. In that moment, I saw the difference clearly. She might still cling to the glittering surface of life, but she would never know the peace that I carried within me. A year later, I decided to leave Seattle and buy a small house by a lake in Oregon. It was a modest wooden home with a wide porch facing the shimmering water under the sun. In the mornings, I sipped hot coffee while listening to birds singing from the distant pines. In the afternoons, I worked on research reports or joined video calls with colleagues from around the world. In the evenings, I strolled around the lake, breathing in the scent of forest and water carried by the breeze. That simple, peaceful life was the dream I never dared to imagine as a child. One morning, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the ripples dance across the lake, and my mind wandered back to it all. The pink piggy bank with its few coins, the voicemail threatening to call the police, the dinner where I finally said no. It all felt like a film that had already ended, and here I was, sitting in an entirely different conclusion. I whispered to myself, "Cutting away the toxic isn't selfish, it's saving yourself." And if anyone out there is listening to this story, I want to leave you with a message. If your family does not value you, be strong enough to walk away. Don't let favoritism, neglect, or cruel words define who you are. Rewrite your story with your own hands, your own steps, and your resilient heart. Because in the end, you don't need anyone's recognition to exist. You only need yourself to truly live. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again in the next story.